and welcome to a brand new episode of Delivering Marketing Joy. I am your host, Kirby Hassman, and joining me today is a repeat guest and a bona fide rock star. She is the director of marketing, events, public relations of American Solutions for Business, and she was recently named as one of the top people on Dale Denham's Online 18. Taylor Borst, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, Kirby, thanks for having me back on.
It's good. It's great to see you. Great to see you. We were, in the interest of transparency, you and I caught up a little bit in Vegas, and we were like, we got to do this again and kind of reconnect over a few new questions. So I appreciate you taking the time. I want to jump right in on the Online 18 thing. I mean, you were recently named as one of the top leaders in online influence in the promo industry. Dale Denham does a great job every year on his Online 18. So first of all, congrats.
Thanks.
And second, that means you're creating a ton of content, right? That's how you kind of get recognized in those ways. So I'm curious, and again, we kind of chatted a little bit about this back in Vegas, but I wanted to ask you on the show here, there have to be times when you're not feeling it. And consistency is really important. So I guess my question is, how do you keep going when you aren't feeling it, or do you?
Sure. Well, yeah, Kirby, I mean, it's funny that you mentioned our Vegas conversation, because at that point, I think you and I were just like so drained from the week. And it was just like, we found each other and we were just like, oh man, this is great, but what a grind. So I love how we kind of got to this topic that we're going to go into today. And I think first, the more that I think about this, I had to think about from the outside here, it's so easy to underestimate the strategy and process and time that goes into social media management and content creation. So even if you're bringing so much transparency and realism to the table all the time, your social media footprint can still look like a highlight reel, and it's not always sunshine and rainbows and super easy and just flows right off the tongue, right?
That's
and so I think what you and I are talking about today is extremely important, because especially for the people who are just starting out, the moment that they start to feel that grind or challenge, I think it's really tempting to quit, because it feels like something has to be wrong, right? Or I'm not cut out for this, or, I can't do it. And that's just simply not true. So, if you're working on that article or video or photo, or I guess whatever content that you're working on, it can be extremely frustrating. And the thing is that it's a different type of frustration. It's not like, oh, my Outlook isn't working or UPS is delaying a customer delivery. In that scenario, you are the product. Yeah. And in that moment, you're malfunctioning.
Yeah, you're the problem.
So it can just feel so uncomfortable, especially at first. And like any skill, it's incredibly important to practice resilience as well. And so, the thing is, I love creating this content, and it can be super rewarding and fulfilling and all that good stuff. But if you let it can really drain you, and it can drain you if you don't have those strategies in place. So I'm super excited to really drill down into that a little bit more with you today.
Yeah, I love what you talked about that. It's so funny, because I think you're right. I think people think, oh, well, when it gets hard, like maybe I'm just not cut out for this or whatever. And I've given so many pieces of advice where the entire piece of advice was, just do one more tomorrow. Just keep going. Like, that's good advice. You know what I mean? Just like, well, should I do this, or should I shift, or should I do that? No, just do one more tomorrow. Just keep going, because you're in a little bit of a rut, and you'll come out on the other side. And so I think that, I think there are times where you just got to keep going. So with that in mind, burnout for many in the business world it's a real thing. And I think even, while like I know you're working from home and there's a lot of people who are, sometimes I think it's just a different kind of burnout. So I think it can be even more because you can't escape. So how do you overcome that and keep doing good work? How do you keep showing up tomorrow?
Sure. So I have a couple different strategies that I really want to focus on. So the first is recognizing that it's okay to take a break. So, I always subscribe to the thought that quality typically is going to be more effective than quantity. And so it's okay to not constantly be on that hamster wheel and feel like you have to constantly be pushing something out. Sometimes pushing something out isn't always better than pushing nothing out. It's okay if you need to take a little step back. And I think our egos would always like to tell us that, like, oh, my audience will notice, or they'll be upset if I don't push something out, nobody's going to notice. Like, I think that they'll be okay.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
we're not celebrities. People aren't paying that close attention. Like, it's all right to take a step back if you need to do that. The second piece I would say would be to diversify your content. So what has worked really well for me is, focusing on different mediums. So, I write articles, I push out photos, and then focus on videos. And even that can have a few different approaches too, whether it's a live stream or an interview like you and I are doing right now, short form videos, or more kind of multimedia videos, like on TikTok. So it just keeps it fresh and exciting. And you don't really get bored as quickly because you're always kind of playing around with another type of content. And then it's also fun to play on different platforms too, and almost experiment like what works best on each platform, and always kind of get into that mindset of not everything has to be perfect. If you're just doing it for experimental purposes, it's fine if something doesn't work. You don't ever have to do it again. So just keeping that open mind is really beneficial. And then I would say the third part of that too would be to balance consistency and spontaneity. So anchoring yourself with a few really consistent projects where you don't really have to think about it. You can kind of keep it a little bit on autopilot in a way, and then that way really focus on, what you're talking about and dig deeper there. So, for example, every week I do kind of a short form video interview, kind of exactly like we're doing today with one of our supplier partners. And I host that in our ASB internal Facebook group. And those are always really fun, short, simple to set up and share. So, just kind of something I don't really have to think about reconstructing every single time. And then every month I do put out a promo corner article. And for that, I really enjoy that because it takes a little bit longer, but I get to be really deep and intentional with those and kind of focus more energy into that. And then once I kind of have those anchor pieces, then I have a little bit more flexibility to sprinkle in, the random go lives and the photo posts and the videos. So focusing on, 2 to 3 posts per week typically works for me pretty well too. And then I just have 2 little bonus tips for anybody who is either just starting out or feeling super, super stretched for time. One, specifically for distributors, we have a ton of incredible suppliers in our industry who have just beautiful lifestyle libraries. And so really tapping into those and using that as filler content can be very helpful. Some of my favorites are HPG, Hit, and Peerless. And then the second little tip too, it is okay to revive past content.
I totally agree.
like people are going to remember 6 months ago that you posted that one thing that one time. So you could either be really subtle about it and just sprinkle it back in, or you could specifically call it out and say, hey, this was one of my favorite videos that I did 6 months ago. Check it out. Like, completely fine to do that. So
boy, that's one of my pet peeves. Like, I feel like we've created there's an unwritten rule in content that you can't recycle content that I think is pure horseshit. Like, if it is still appropriate and still adds value to your customers, I'm with you. I'm just like, oh yeah, this is a blog I wrote in August, and I think it's more relevant today than ever before. The end. I mean, and I actually heard that from Gary Vee and his team. I mean, like, so, and so there's some great tips in there. The one I want to unpack is the first one. You said it's okay to take a break. I agree with you. Now, the one caveat I would give you, and I'd be curious to know your take on it, is while I think it's okay to take a break, I think it's important to be intentional about it, because I think one of the and literally say it to, if you're worried that your audience is going to not notice that you're gone, tell them I'm taking a month off. I'll be back in May. And I think it also builds in a little bit of accountability for yourself, because I think one of the problems is if you get out of the habit of it, it's really easy to be out of the habit of it. Right. And so I think, but taking that break is super powerful. So, well, that was awesome. So I want to keep rolling, but that people need to kind of replay that whole answer, because I think there's a ton of value. So that's awesome. So one of the things I'm seeing is like more and more organizations encouraging their teams to learn their own personality type. And that's been going on for some time, but like in my church, we've gone through Enneagrams, and before that it was, introvert, extrovert, all that stuff. So do
Yeah.
you do you subscribe to the idea of the team learning their personality types, and why?
So yes.
Okay.
However, Kirby, I have to give a disclaimer.
Okay. Love it.
If you take the time to do the personality test, you have to take even more time to truly understand what those results actually mean.
Mm,
And then also keep in mind that the results aren't always the end all be all,
I
and
agree.
that it's always up for interpretation. So
Yeah.
just because you test into a certain thing doesn't mean that that's how you have to look at yourself, or that it even means that it's 100% true, because
Right.
we're all on a spectrum, right? So actually within the last year, I have taken the Myers-Briggs and kind of gone through a training process independently. And then I've also done a communication personality test with my team, which has been just incredibly beneficial in so many ways. But to really bring it around to our conversation today, I talked a little bit before about how in content creation, you have to consider yourself as the product, right?
Yeah.
And so a personality assessment is really just fancy product research, right? It's R&D on, on
I
yourself.
love it. Okay. Yeah. I like that.
So getting to understand that is very beneficial. But one key example of an aha moment of mine, you actually just mentioned introversion and extroversion, and I
Mhm.
want to dig into that just a little bit here. But
Mhm.
it really did come down to better understanding my extroversion results. Um, so I always thought that I was an introvert that just had developed learned extroversion traits, because
Okay.
like for me, I was like, oh, I need so much time alone and downtime to decompress, and I can't be with people all the time.
Totally.
But it did come down to the education side of it, was that I realized that I had a misunderstanding of the idea of extroversion also. And
Yeah.
so it doesn't mean that you need to be the loudest person in the room, or constantly be with people. But what really resonated with me was that when faced with a problem, introverts tend to internalize and extroverts tend to seek connection. And so it just clicked for me. I was like, yes, that's totally right. So when I'm struggling, it's most beneficial to talk it out with somebody.
Yep.
So when I am having issues with figuring out content or coming up with a topic or anything, I know, because I did my own R&D, right, that this product needs to connect with somebody else to
That's
bounce
great.
those ideas and verbalize, right? Where when we've done a little bit more work with, like, let's say our team, knowing that I have some people who are skewed on the introversion side of things, in that scenario, they're going to find more success by removing any noise and external input. And so there's kind of that balance there too. And just going back to that leadership perspective, it is extremely important to understand yourself and your team members so that you can best support them and their needs,
Yeah.
and just figure out how do we tap into the ways that work best for all of us.
Yeah. Wow. And it really is powerful. And I think what you have said is it's been helpful to me because as people might expect, doing content and all the stuff that I do, I am an extrovert. But
Mhm.
as you said, we're on a scale, right? And I think it depends on
Yes.
the day. Like some days I really have to put on my extrovert, like a
Yeah.
pair of pants. Like, okay, I know
Yeah.
I'm going to this place. And then once I get there, I'm good. And I do, it's fine. But yeah, I think we're all on a scale. And the other
We are.
thing that it's like the way that I've always managed it is like, where do I find my energy? I like the way that
Sure.
you're talking about it, but like for some, there are some of the best speakers in the world are introverts, but
Hmm.
at the end of a speaking engagement, they're exhausted, right? And so they need to go someplace and kind of reboost. They're
Right.
good at it, but it doesn't mean that gives them energy. For me, being on stage provides me energy. I'm fired up at the end of it, and so I think that's a way to kind of help you understand yourself and do the R&D on your own product as well.
Right. And
So
knowing how to troubleshoot best for your personality type, it'll get you out of a rut and save you a lot of time just spiraling.
I love it. Okay, cool. Final question for you.
So,
As you are creating more and more content, as you were talking about, I love your idea about anchors and all that sort of thing. but you also are having more responsibilities, right? You've gotten promotions not too terribly long ago. And so you've got a team that you're managing. So the question's pretty simple. How do you keep up? So have you learned to
Well,
delegate, or are you just grinding?
sure. I mean, Kirby, first of all, it's just very kind of you to assume that I'm keeping.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
um, no, I mean, it is a lot, right?
Right.
First of all, I have to say, I feel incredibly, incredibly fortunate to have the team and the support system that I do. So, I mean, I know Kirby, you and my boss Jane Azezo, you guys go back pretty far here. I know you guys are tight.
Yep.
But you know, we work together and talk a lot about the idea of delegate and elevate, and that we
Mm,
can't do it all, and that we have to we have to split up the work and build our team members. And so the biggest key, I think, to that is that delegating isn't just putting something off of your plate so that you can focus on something else. It's about delegating and then nurturing that growth so that the person who's taking on the project is actually in a position to outperform what you ever did, which
mm,
also takes a little bit of
humility.
introspection, and you have to put ego aside and really understand that your true success comes in ensuring that the person that you are building up will always outshine you eventually.
Mm,
and
I love
and
that.
that is, I think that that's what a lot of people struggle with, right? And it's the ability to kind of pass the torch while also planting a million other seeds around you. And I think that that's what good leadership is. So, for example, Simi Kasakwe, she's our PR specialist that's joined us within the last year. And, it's been extremely exciting to just watch her develop and quickly understand ASB's culture and, our marketing and events teams. They're also continually evolving too, and just making a big impact within ASB and the industry. We also have a new team member, Emily Jetner, who has joined within the last year. She's just killing it. So we're in a really good spot for our team. And then kind of looking above a little bit. So our senior leadership team is more present in the industry than they've really ever been before. And so
Yeah.
we've also brought on Bori Lee. He was with Handstands HPG right before us, but he's a regional VP with us, and he's just been killing it when it
Mm.
comes to advocating for ASB and really just kind of, pushing us forward here. So I guess, brand identity should never just fall on one person's shoulders. It's that multiple voices all kind of working together in conjunction is always going to create exponential growth and impact. And not to like end on too cheesy of a note, but I have to share one of my favorite quotes that I think about constantly is that if you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. And I think that that just speaks to how our team has really been positioning, especially these last several years here. And I'm just super excited to see where we're going.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think, you hear about the difference between management by delegation and management by abdication. And I think at first, as you're a leader, sometimes management by abdication is what we do. It's like, okay, I've given that to somebody else and now that's theirs. But I think it takes what you just said, I loved, where you're like, they need to outshine what you would have done.
Yeah.
That's great leadership, but it's also pretty damn secure, right? There's a level of insecurity when you hand something off as like,
Yeah.
I think many people are worried that they will be outshined. But when that's the goal, I think there's a lot of power in that. So that's great advice. So thank you. Thank you so much, Taylor. I
Yeah.
appreciate
Thank
you
you.
taking the
It's
time.
so fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, congrats on the online 18. Appreciate all that you're
Yes.
doing. And we will have to do this again sometime. Okay.
Yes, please.
All
Thanks so
right.
much, Kirby.
You bet. Well, that's going to wrap up this edition of Delivering Marketing Joy. We'll see you next time.